Hi guys, I'm here with Annalisa Six. Is that your last name?
It's my last name.
It really is your last name.
It's my husband's actual last name.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So Annalisa Six, and you go by Cosmic Lady Six on Instagram. So we are going to be talking about consumption, and this is the season for that. There's a lot of consumption going on right now. So we both sort of, I guess, fell into a transformation in our life where we both became vegan. We both stopped partying, stopped drinking alcohol. How did that start for you?
So it was kind of, I do astrology, and like my nature is to be an addict of stuff. So either substances or just anything that I decide I like. It could be clothes, it could be working out, it could be anything. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I have like an excessive nature. Mm-hmm. So whatever I like, I want a lot of. And so when I started drinking, it was pretty much like immediately became a problem for me. And I spent the next like 9 years of my life struggling off and on with consumption, like overconsumption. And before it was alcohol and drugs, it was food. Like I always had a hard time as a kid self-regulating.
Like for me, it was my weight. I was just like, of course I'm going to struggle with my weight if I just keep eating all the cheese all the time.
Totally, same.
So I was like, well, if I tried going vegan, no cheese, like that's obviously going to make an impact on my weight. And so I started with that, but it was also because I was just watching all the like crazy documentaries that were coming out at the time. Like, what was that? I was like Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. There was some other
Cowspiracy.
Yeah.
Earthlings. Traumatic one.
I know.
Yeah.
I actually never watched Earthlings. It came out and I watched the intro where Joaquin Phoenix just like starts talking about our connection to animals, and I started crying so bad that I was like, I can't. I shut it off.
I Clockwork Orange myself. I was cat sitting and I was like just watching all the documentaries that were coming out, because it was my second time being vegan when these movies were coming out. The first time I was vegan, there weren't any documentaries like this. You just had like animal activists on corners handing out pamphlets that were filled with terrible photos, and that was it.
And you're like, no, leave me alone.
Pretty much, yeah. And the first time I went vegan and kind of started to cut back drinking was when I was 18, 19. I think I was 18. And then I was vegan for a few years, and I still drank, but I still smoked cigarettes pretty excessively and partied like off and on, but
I didn't know you smoked too.
I smoked for 10 years.
You did like a really hard.
Oh my God. Yeah. So like I went back to being vegan in November of 2016 on World Vegan Day, which I think is November 1st. And then I went sober December 29th of that year, and then I quit smoking February
8th. Interesting.
And
then
I
all the dates down.
Yeah.
Mine's easy because I did it on 4th of July. I was like,
awesome.
screw all this barbecue food. I'm going to eat another hot dog for the rest of my life.
I'm not going to have a constipation stomach ache again. Yeah, I have a lot of digestive issues, I think, from, like, I did eat a lot of dairy as a kid, and then had excessive eating problems and, like, issues with my weight. And then I had a lot of emotional and, like, traumatic distress as a kid that, like, I, went to food as a coping mechanism and things and toys and all that kind of stuff. And so I never really learned how to cope with my feelings without consumption in some way.
Yeah.
And so having to and then adding like a drug problem and alcohol on top of those already existing issues was pretty awful to do to myself. So
isn't it weird how you think you're coping with something by doing the thing, but it's actually just compounding the problem?
Yeah.
Worse and worse.
And then when you cut out those things, then the problems come out, and then you're forced to deal with it. So a lot of times people will be like, when you go sober, you're this like healthy, happy person. It's like, actually, it hurts and you feel terrible, like, because you're actually feeling things.
Yeah, well, you're going through that transformation in your body as well. That's like, wait, what are you doing? Like, you're used to all this consumption and alcohol, and it's like basically withdrawal. For me, because they talk about like that switch, because a lot of people who go vegan sometimes don't stick with it. And I think for me, it was like the switch that they talk about, like, you flipped a switch and it's just on all the time now. because I can't flip it off. I can't go back
Yeah.
to like that lifestyle where I was miserable. And I know that it came from drinking too much and eating really unhealthy food and not working out and basically just being lazy and miserable. So it's like, well, do I want to go back to those feelings? No, so I'm going to have to keep this like kind of momentum going. So how would you describe that you flip that switch? Because it's just on now, right?
Yeah, totally. It feels like it's a lifestyle versus like a choice. And I think part of like being vegan for 3 years and then going back, because it was like I was in this incline towards where I'm at now, but I, had life stuff happen and I just reverted back. I was one of those people that went back the first time around. And I spent a couple years, eating and drinking and doing drugs again in a really unhealthy way. And I also had this framework of like, well, when I did this, I felt great. And so I knew that there was like another way that I could live that would feel better. And so I think by the time that the next time around it happened, I was just like, I need to grow the F up, and I know that this is the better choice for me, and I don't care if it upsets anybody, because I was worried that all my friends who partied and drank and weren't vegan, and my husband who's not vegan and was still drinking at the time, like that this would now put distance between me and my social circles, and at the time
judgment too that comes along with that.
And I think that's what made me not continue with it the first time, was I just felt so isolated trying to be healthy because I had so many unhealthy people around me. And by the second time around, I was just descending into such a hole in myself that I had to decide that if it meant losing everyone that I loved to be the better, healthier version of myself, that it was worth it. And that I had to choose me over anything else if I was going to continue to be on this planet and like live.
And don't you find it interesting too that especially like a rock and roll like party lifestyle, so much of that attitude is like, I don't care, I don't give a fuck. Like, so then how could you make a lifestyle choice and then care so much about what people think about your lifestyle choice? The whole premise of it is like, I don't give a fuck, I'll drink this fucking smoothie right here.
Yeah, totally. Well, that was my issue when I was younger. When I was a teenager, I saw the fallacy in that. And I remember thinking, well, it's actually more punk to care, because that's the whole point, I thought, of being the whole point of being a rebel and disrupting the system is because you're above it and you see the corruption going on, not to become somebody who's just almost kind of being abused by the system,
and then totally just going along with it.
And then totally out of control and unable to actually do anything about it. You know. And
well, if you think about all the like renegades and the trailblazers, they were the people that were doing the completely different thing than what
exactly. We've been brainwashed to think that consumption is empowerment. So addiction and consumption isn't just the obvious of alcohol and food and drugs. It's also what we buy and
what we watch, our TV shows. After I did combo, I was like so sensitive to how to integrate in my life, like in a new way, like this different mindset. And I was watching all these Netflix shows about like rape and murder, and I was literally like so overwhelmed that I just had to shut it off. And then I like got hooked on Gaia TV. So
Gaia's great. That's more like the positive reinforcement. Like, let's up your vibe. Or if anybody's watching, you don't know what that is, there's a channel that you can stream called Gaia. And you can buy it through their website, or you can stream it on Amazon, I think. Amazon Prime lets you. But
I have it on Amazon Prime.
Me too,
This is not sponsored, by the way.
We're not sponsored, but we just love Gaia.
Gaia
But they have yoga and meditations and then like all these self-help spiritual videos, which I think are positive for people that don't read or like watching things, because there's a lot of good stuff. And I've been watching stuff on there for a couple of years, and it's gotten better like as it progresses.
Did you fall into did you ever play video games?
I love video games. Did you fall into
the Grand Theft Auto thing that would happen, where you would be driving crazy in the video game and you'd go out in the world and you'd be like, get him?
Well, the thing is, I never drove during that time. I'm a late bloomer with the driving. But
it had that effect
I
on me,
did feel that way afterwards in life in general, where I'd want to like walk like the Grand Theft Auto game and like destruction seemed really exciting. Totally. Well, it's funny because they came out with Red Dead Redemption, which is like a Wild West version of that, and that's a huge game that my husband and I are super into, which is part of why we want to move out to the desert. Is like we want to live the real life of the video game.
Well, that's what's crazy is all this stuff does sort of like program you in a weird way, like influences.
Because this is a simulation.
Oh, you want to go down that rabbit hole?
That's what my podcast is going to be about.
Oh, I love it. Have me on it. I love
will.
going down that rabbit hole. But I think when it comes to like us being vibrational beings, how would you say that your lifestyle choices has kind of changed that part of you?
I would say that there was a very obvious 180 from drunk drug Annalisa to sober vegan Annalisa, where like literally everything in my life changed. I went from really having a lot of financial problems and not like living paycheck to paycheck in a way that was not building anything towards my future. I blew through money when it came to just dumb stuff in a way that I didn't really think about or care about. Not saying I don't still make terrible money decisions, but it's just maybe not as focused on and stupid. Like I'm not just randomly buying clothes all the time like I was, or I'm not obsessed with like cheap $20 shoes just because they're the knockoff version or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like an overall mindset now. Like you're like, well, maybe I want more quality things and like invest my money a little bit.
So one of the things that was positive about going vegan was because of the ethical side, not just the dietary health side. It made me really question my nature of buying things like that. You know, like what companies do I want to support and how do I want to do that? And so I kind of started aligning my goals in my life less about scarce mentality and how to succeed and more about how to live in line with a value system that's ethical and good for the planet or meaningful in my life. And when I asked myself what would the best version of myself look like and I made that list, I saw somebody that was really healthy, that had a strong spiritual practice, that was vegan, that you know, did things consciously without being reactive and stressed out. And I was just like, okay, I just got to chip away at that person. And in the past, like romanticizing drinking and smoking cigarettes and partying was what I wanted to do. And after a while, I was like, this isn't making me happy. So there's a part of my life where I'm like, I'm glad I played that out because it made it that much easier for me to stop.
So it's kind of like you reverse engineered.
Yeah.
Like you saw this like higher self and then you were like, well, if I want to be that, like, how do I get there?
Yeah. And so what happened once I started making those goals, and especially when my husband got on board with the sobriety too, is our income quadrupled.
Yeah.
Like I'm not even kidding. Like it was like all of a sudden.
Well, because you were focused more on the abundance of your life probably because you were talking about scarcity. So
yeah. I would say what happened was the money wasn't the focus. It was the health and the integrity of our life that was the focus. And then the money just started happening. Yeah. And everything just started happening. It was like the vision, but also making who I was match up to the vision.
Totally.
Just worked like and really fast. It didn't take very long. It was like I've only been sober 4 years in December.
Yeah.
So it's been 4 years of like, and you know, I bought my dream car. We're buying a house. We bought 10 acres.
Awesome. The truth of the matter is you never stop wanting to be that best, higher version of yourself, right? Because it's always evolving.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, because I'm sure like who you wanted to be 5 years ago is different than who that higher self is now, right?
Totally. Like I am who I wanted to be 5 years ago.
So now you're like, I have to come up with a different version.
Now I have my like 65-year-old self now that I see.
What does she look like?
Like this, but 65.
It's so funny because I'm almost 40. I always ask me like, oh my god, what are your beauty secrets? Like, what do you do? Like, do you bathe in baby's blood?
You're yes, I do.
I'm vegan. Like
vegan babies.
But I think when I tell people like, I think veganism is actually the thing that has helped me just.
Oh, I agree. I regress age. Like I look younger now than I did when I was younger.
Yeah, it's crazy. But people don't believe that. They're just like, okay, yeah, more vegetables, whatever, but how do I get the baby's blood?
Yeah, totally. No, for sure. People are sick. I feel like one of the things too I want to add, like I get kind of nervous when I mention the positive things from a material sense, just in terms of like, oh, we have all of our financial stuff and material stuff got better. I think that is a result though of making my intention and priority not about that. So it's like I walk dogs with behavioral issues, and then I also do tarot and astrology readings, and my entire life revolves around being of service and helping others. And then my husband, like, he works in the service industry. It's not, I mean, the irony is that he manages a bar, but, you know, he's providing people with a good time.
Don't you feel like, oh my God, there's so many people like that. So
Yeah.
many people working as bartenders. Don't
Yeah.
you think that's a thing? Because they're just like, maybe if I have this constant flow of people reminding me of the bad choices that I used to make, there's just like a daily reminder of like, okay, good, I'm on the right track. I don't want to be that person anymore.
I think that there's something about being able to master sobriety in the face of the trigger that is really empowering.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I kind of did that for a while when I first went sober. Like, I would still go to parties and try to like test myself to make sure I was really sober. And I knew, you know, if you're still having inklings or thoughts towards wanting to do those things, I think it's a pretty big sign that you're still on that line of having to really be mindful with the environments you put yourself in. And now it's like, I don't, like you were saying earlier, like, you're probably not going to see me out at a bar the way that we met or anything like that unless I'm working, you know, like I have a show or I'm doing tarot cards or something. And it's true, like, I don't want to be in those environments, especially now that I do spiritual work as a living, because I'm really sensitive to what others under the influence of substances feel like. And so it just makes me that much more hyper aware of, like, if I'm in a situation where I'm doing tarot and there's a lot of people in that space and they're all really drunk, I will start to feel drunk.
How alcohol is referred to as spirit.
Yeah. That's the alchemist named it that. Yeah.
Because it actually like those like blackout moments you have where you're just like, that wasn't me. I didn't say that. I didn't do that. And then you're like, damn, I really did do that and say that. It's almost like you got possessed by a spirit or something.
Well, and that's what alcohol was made for by alchemists. They created spirits to take while they were trying to communicate with spirits. And when you are doing this type of work, you know very much that if you're taking drugs or helpers, that you're inviting the egregore of that thing in. The thought form of the frequency of the vibration of that elixir.
Yeah, it's crazy too, because people, I mean, in society, it's just like drinking is just such a norm and I don't see it on that level. But that's what's happening.
So we have whiskey drunk versus champagne drunk, because there's different thought forms attached to those.
I prefer the tequila.
Yeah, totally. And some people, that's not, you know. So yeah, our energy, that's the thing, like our frequency, the way it matches up with anything else. You know, we think of like atoms responding to atoms. It's just everything we consume and that we're even just around. We have an energy body that's outside of our body, that's absorbing before it even gets to our physical body. And so that's something we also in the Western culture don't think about. That's why it is really important to be really mindful and conscientious of who you surround yourself with or where you surround yourself with.
Yeah, so people could also be consumption.
Yeah.
Basically what you're letting into your auric field is like, well, people are a big one, right? Because people can definitely affect your vibration.
Yeah. Where you live.
As we know, during the holidays when we're around our family members.
Totally. And another thing with consumption in that vein is when we do feel threatened or scarce in our field, we're more likely to consume because it gives us a sense of security.
Yeah.
So
it's
if
like a comfort.
Yeah. So if we grew up like feeling anxious or afraid of having our resources met, then we'll want to spend more, eat more, consume more to fill that fear.
Don't you feel like it's cool going through this transformation? At least for myself personally, I feel like since I did this work, I now know when I wake up and I feel sort of depressed or I feel like I'm maybe low vibe, like I know now what I can do to like get myself to feeling better and having like a better day as a result of that. Like if it's what I'm eating for breakfast, or like maybe I'll go for a walk or work out, or I know what's going to get me to that place because I've done that work. Whereas I think people who don't switch up their habits, they don't know that they can feel better. They don't know how to feel better. So you get like kind of stuck.
It's the Joe Dispenza part of you that's talking. Yeah, totally.
I know, guys. It gets into the science of it, like down to the very like cellular, like it's pretty intense.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Did you watch the show?
I've watched
Rewired?
I haven't watched Rewired. No,
Yeah.
I was watching an interview.
I really love hearing science back
Me
up
too.
a lot of this stuff, because sometimes when we're talking, we get like woo-woo about stuff, and it's hard for people who don't maybe see the manifestation of doing the work in their life. They don't see the evidence of it. So they're just like, oh yeah, like theory, sounds good in theory. But then when there's actually like science to back it up, rather than your own personal validation that you've got from your experience, I'm like, damn, like this is like on a whole other level now because it's science.
Yeah, totally. I feel the same way.
Yeah.
They say it, or I think he says, and some people like him say like science is the new mysticism. We're just not looking at it like that. Astrologers were the first astronomers.
Mm-hmm.
The alchemists were the first chemists, the first scientists. You know, the magicians and all the archetypal astrology stuff were like the first philosophers, psychologists, and all the like great scientists we've had of our time have had very outlandish ideas that usually are kind of dubbed heretics or crazy. Totally. And then years later, they're on a pedestal, like regarded as the most amazing people, you know, and even, especially in the medical field. So it's like the history of our world is like the people that were responsible for the most innovation and evolution of our species were not regarded that way. They were regarded as crazy and totally going against the grain with these woo, outlandish, preposterous ideas. And I feel like the scientists in the quantum physics kind of community are also treated that way, but they're the ones that are actually really, I think, making the most.
They're making an impact because they have the evidence. You say it's science.
The quantum field, like that's legit. That's not there's no question. Like there's a quantum field.
Yeah, it's just like the law of attraction. They call it the law of attraction, not the belief of attraction. It's the law.
So I think that when you're focusing on your consumption and your output too, because we can talk about input and output, which is also kind of cause and effect. That's a law. Like cause and effect is the law of part of the order of our existence in this realm, and that's just, it's not debatable. So there's a cause and effect to our input and our output, and it's on all levels. It doesn't matter if it's eating or drugs or alcohol. And to me, it's just very like, you know, people will be like, how do I fix my life? And it's like, well, what's your output look like and what's your input look like? And matching your output and your input with the frequency of the things that you want is how you get the things that you will. To manifest what I want is strong. And I've had to learn, oh, wait a minute, just because I wanted that would like, this last year I was like, I really want a book deal. I want somebody to approach me with a book deal. I want to write a book. I want a team of editors. I want somebody to help me. And then I got approached with a book deal, and it was not what I wanted. Like everything about it wasn't right. And I was like, oh, I didn't set a clear intention. That happens to me a lot with readings with clients too, where people will, you know, we'll do a set of readings and they'll just say that they want a relationship in their life to present themselves, and they're still kind of getting over a past relationship and all this kind of stuff. And then they'll do all the work on themselves to align themselves with being able to receive that relationship, and then it comes and they're still recovering still. They didn't realize that it was going to come so soon or so fast.
And they're not ready.
Yeah. They'll be like, wait a minute, I'm not ready. Like, I didn't realize that was going to happen so soon, you know? And so it's that thing too of kind of being like, it's not a matter of whether or not you can, it's whether or not you'll be ready when the opportunity comes. And is this the right time for it?
Well, I think it's also like you're ready for what you're ready for, and then you're ready for what you're ready for.
Yeah.
So they probably were ready on some level, but that thing was going to get them more ready for something else. That's
when you're tested. The universe says, all right, it's time to show up.
Like, no, I don't want to believe that the universe is testing me.
Well, so the universe, we give it like this kind of like Godhead as if it has like an opinion. It doesn't. It's neutral. It's just cause and effect. It's just energy responding to energy. Maybe there's a Godhead that has an opinion, but I don't think so. I think that it's neutral and that it's chaos and that it's just frequency responding to different frequency, and then there's probably subdivisions of frequencies that have opinions, but I don't think that the universe has an opinion. I think it's just responding.
I think we perceive it as a test because we know that there's something in there that is going to be that stepping stone to something else. It may not be the actual thing that we thought we were manifesting.
Yeah.
Like that's why they say be careful what you wish for.
That's messy manifestation. You know, that's like
it's unfocused manifestation.
Yeah, it's when you're just
unspecific.
throwing things out there and not really actually wanting to do the work or show up for it, which
Yeah.
I've done that a lot of times in my life, and it's always like that. I feel like it's not always going to be exactly the way that you want it to go, and I think that that's the thing with consumption and with your relationship to your world is just knowing that there's vibrational frequencies on everything, and you know, as the table has a frequency, the light has a frequency, so we're always kind of responding or communicating to our world. And when we become really subtly aware of those frequencies and our frequency that we're emitting, we can take more responsibility for what we project onto others and how we respond to situations, and that in turn kind of what creates the fabric of the life that we end up living.
Yeah, I think responsibility is a huge part of consumption because sometimes we end up feeling victims of our life. But you're like, but I'm actually doing the thing that's making me unhealthy or feel like shit, and it's hard to take responsibility for that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you think, well, you know, I'm dealing with this problem by drinking because that's the way I know how to cope, but why are you choosing to cope that way? Take responsibility for the choice of maybe picking something that is a really unhealthy way of coping with it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I want to ask people who I interview, what is their idea of conscious beauty? So what do you think conscious beauty is?
I feel like in the past it was insecurity, and it was kind of like figuring out a way to adorn something that I was insecure with.
Yeah.
And if I'm being like totally honest, that's what motivated me going to beauty school and wanting to figure out ways to adorn myself and dyeing my hair and
to make you more attractive so that you could attract something or
yeah, and like my perception of what I thought was attractive, right? And I think that one of the things when I went sober and vegan and started dog walking was I just stopped doing all of it. I stopped dyeing my hair, I stopped wearing makeup every day, and I worked really hard on loving myself for just what was underneath. And it's still something I struggle with, but now I think that for me, conscious beauty has to do with more of my love language to myself and my mental process. So I started doing a lot of self-love meditations. Like I'd find them on YouTube and close my eyes, and I also do gratitude journaling. And there was some woman that did a lecture about writing like positive affirmations to yourself on your mirror.
Like mirror work is a really important it can be a really useful method of like just accepting your body, accepting who you are. It's an interesting relationship with yourself because sometimes it's hard to admit that you actually don't love yourself. But like you're saying, you just got into a healthy relationship with yourself where you were just like, well, now I can show up the way that I really want to, what feels right on the inside, right? Not necessarily influenced by society or other things. Like maybe you were picking from a place of insecurity, whereas now you're more secure with how you're presenting yourself. Yeah,
and I feel like I'm kind of focused, like when I put makeup on and adorn myself, it really is just because I enjoy it and it's fun. I like the way the Native American, like different Native American tribes, I don't know what specific tribe, but things that I've read about how they saw, you know, their adornment as this body is kind of like our spiritual temple or our vessel. And when they'd go into war, that's when they'd wear their best clothing because they wanted to die in their most beautiful adornment. And
I love that.
There's other cultures that have similar things like that. Like the Egyptians, you know, all their makeup and adornment had to do with wanting to be the most presentable and the most, you know, best version of themselves for when they passed into the afterlife.
That's really cool. Like we could die right now and just be like,
I'd feel pretty good about it.
I feel pretty good too.
of me that, like, I love the idea of making myself love who I am, even just being a wrinkly old lady and down to that, but then also the frequency of the things I put on myself has an intention around what I'm supporting in the world and what the statement that I'm making as Annalisa while she's here. So I try to wear things that I feel like speak to that or who I am in that way.
Yeah, I love that.
More about kind of less about, is this trendy right now? Is it in season? Is it, do my friends like it? I don't care about any of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's more, do I like it?
Do I like it? Is this an expression of who I feel like I want to be?
Yeah.
In this 3D world.
Yeah, and whatever that is. I don't think there's a wrong answer. It's just whatever feels like you. And in the past, I might be like, oh, sunglasses are for 20-year-olds. Like these heart sunglasses. But no, I love them, and I'm just like, I'm gonna turn into that kooky old lady that's wearing things that are probably not appropriate for her age, and I don't care. It's gonna be kooky and kind of bohemian.
Totally.
It's just me.
All right, well, I think we got some good things to share here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's so fun.
For being on the Rituals by Cat IGTV. Bye, guys.